Hey everyone! Welcome to The Young and the Restless. I'm Jane, and I'm so excited to have you here. If you love Young and the Restless, then you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Alright, let's dive right in. According to Monday, August 11th spoilers for The Young and the Restless, Diane Jenkins Abbott receives some disturbing news, and Daniel Romalotti Jr. will discuss his true feelings for Tessa Porter. Daniel will first go to the park with Danny Romalotti to catch up. Regarding Daniel's relationship with Tessa and the recent direction it has taken, at least from his perspective, it will be quite illuminating. Daniel will perceive that his kid might see Tessa as more than just a friend based on what he confides. Eventually, Daniel will admit that he could be falling for Tessa, but there will undoubtedly be complications because of her pending marriage. Despite their breakup and Mariah's reluctance to talk about her problems, Tessa still has feelings for Mariah Copeland. Tessa will continue to struggle and question whether they have a future together because Mariah is excluding her and making decisions about their relationship on her own. After a strategy session with Billy Abbott, Jack Abbott will likely have a lot on his mind, according to YNR spoilers. At some point, Jack will tell Diane about Kane Ashby's intentions in Genoa City and how Billy could assist keep Jabot safe. But when Diane learns that Billy might make or ruin the family business's future, she will become quite concerned. For this takedown operation to succeed, Billy will need to persuade Kane that he is a team player. Billy will be expected to provide Jack with intelligence in order to eventually stop Kane from inside. Naturally, Diane might wonder if they can rely on Billy to remain faithful to the Abbotts. Diane might worry that they need a backup plan in case Billy fails them because he also gets sidetracked frequently. Regarding Kane, he will contemplate whether he ought to proceed with an alliance with Victor Newman in opposition to the Abbotts. There is a chance that both parties will betray each other, even if Kane gives Victor the impression that they have come to an understanding. According to teasers for The Young and the Restless, Victor and Kane will need to exercise caution, so we'll keep you informed about any potentially nefarious developments. Unspoken feelings, unsolved conflict, and a hint of anything more than friendship have all been characteristics of Daniel and Tessa's complicated relationship. Daniel's feelings for Tessa have been conflicted throughout their contacts, alternating between possessiveness, protectiveness, and something far more personal. His actions point to a man torn between duty and desire, between his actual actions and his perceived feelings. Diane's disturbing news, meanwhile, acts as a trigger, making Daniel face feelings he has long repressed. The combination of these two factors, Daniel's covert feelings for Tessa and the upheaval caused by Diane's disclosure, causes psychological and emotional upheaval that alters his relationships and sense of himself. Daniel and Tessa's relationship has been loaded with an unsaid heat since the beginning. He is pulled to her in ways he does not completely comprehend, and he frequently hides his own feelings under a front of pragmatism or apathy. But his behavior betrays him. A deeper attachment is suggested by the way he observes her when she isn't looking, the subtle changes in tone when she is around another man, and the protectiveness that goes beyond simple friendship. However, Daniel takes great satisfaction in his ability to maintain control and reason, so acknowledging such emotions would upset the well-planned structure of his existence. He has persuaded himself that his feelings are only worry or perhaps a sense of duty, but the reality is far more nuanced. Guilt, longing, and dread are all intertwined in his feelings for Tessa. He fears being vulnerable, being rejected, and realizing that she has grown more to him than he ever meant. For her part, Tessa seemed to be both conscious of Daniel's feelings and unsure about them. Sometimes she sees him staring at her with an expression she can't understand, times when his normally calm exterior somewhat crumbles to show something raw underneath. She feels that accepting this aspect of him would completely alter their relationship, thus she is both attracted to and cautious of it. Their relationship is in a precarious equilibrium that might either tip over into something more serious or fall apart completely under the weight of unsaid realities. A tense ballet of near confessions and hurried retreats characterizes their push and pull. The ambiguity is greatly increased by Daniel's incapacity to express his emotions, making Tessa wonder if the undercurrents are real or if she is only seeing them. Here comes Diane's disturbing news, a revelation that causes Daniel's entire world to change drastically. His equilibrium is abruptly upset, causing him to reevaluate not only his situation but also his own emotions. Diane's news may be anything, a betrayal, a personal crisis, or a decision that changes Daniel's life, but it has a significant effect on him. It causes him to doubt the decisions he has made and the feelings he has suppressed, upending his sense of security. Above all, it sharply highlights his affections for Tessa. The things we repress tend to come to the surface when faced with possible loss or disruption, and for Daniel, that means facing the true meaning of Tessa. The timing of Diane's announcement is quite important. If it had happened at a different time, Daniel might have been able to compartmentalize and ignore his feelings, as he normally does. However, the news now serves as a catalyst because his affections for Tessa were already seething under the surface. The idea of losing something, be it his own sense of control, Diane's presence in his life, or the tenuous bond he has with Tessa, suddenly becomes intolerable. He is compelled to consider his true desires and, more significantly, the person he cannot live without. He is at an emotional crossroads, which is highlighted by the contrast between Diane's news and his developing bond with Tessa. The way Daniel responds when he thinks Tessa may be in danger or when another guy expresses interest in her is among the most revealing signs of his affections for her. His possessiveness stems from something much more instinctive, almost primordial, than the deliberate control he displays in other aspects of his life. This implies that his feelings are more profound than he acknowledges and have their origins outside of reason. This possessiveness increases when Diane's news arrives, as though he is more fiercely clinging to one stable because he fears losing the other. For the first time, he is compelled to question if his feelings for Tessa are worth fighting for, as the prospect of her slipping away gets entwined with the more general worry of his life falling apart. It is impossible to ignore Diane's contribution to this dynamic. Her existence in Daniel's life signifies something important, whether she is a close friend, family member, or romantic partner, possibly a previous love, a sense of obligation, or an emotional fulcrum. Her disturbing news makes Daniel reevaluate his allegiances and balance his desires for himself against his obligations to her. And it gets more difficult to overlook Tessa's place in his heart during that analysis. What is lacking in each is highlighted by the contrast between his relationship with Diane and his bond with Tessa. Tessa offers passion, unpredictableness, and a feeling of being seen, whereas Diane offers history, comfort, or duty. Whatever Diane's news is, it highlights the boundaries of their relationship and makes Daniel wonder if he has been settling for something safe instead of going after his true wants. Daniel's feelings also contain a sense of guilt. His developing affections for Tessa could feel like a betrayal if Diane has been a constant in his life and someone he loves very much. This guilt makes it even harder for him to accept his feelings, causing an internal struggle between how he feels and how he feels he should. This guilt might be made worse by Diane's announcement, particularly if it shows her suffering or fragility. As a man who takes accountability seriously, Daniel finds it hard to accept the idea of leaving someone in need, even if it means sacrificing his own happiness. However, duty is not often followed by the heart, and the more he attempts to repress his feelings for Tessa, the more they want to be acknowledged. In contrast, Tessa is in a state of uncertainty. Although she is aware of Daniel's internal conflict, she lacks the confidence to act on it. She is left in a state of uncertainty by his conflicting messages, which at one point draw her near and at another push her away. Confusion is exacerbated by Diane's revelation. Tessa might take Daniel's emotional distance as a confirmation of his commitment to someone else if she knows how important Diane is in his life, not understanding that his withdrawal is a result of his own failure to make sense of his feelings. Their predicament is tragic because of the misunderstandings, the silence, and the fear that prevents them from expressing their true feelings for one another. The crucial dilemma is whether Daniel will let obligation, remorse, or fear control his decisions, or if he will allow himself to embrace his love for Tessa. The turning moment that compels him to make a choice is Diane's announcement. Will he keep hiding behind reason and telling himself that his feelings are unimportant or transient? Or will he at last admit that his feelings for Tessa are genuine, strong, and deserving of all the risks he takes? His vulnerability holds the key to the solution. The thought of giving in to emotion scares Daniel since he has lived so much of his life in control. But love necessitates submission by definition. It requires us to accept the possibility of pain and let go of the delusion of control. That submission is embodied by Tessa. She represents everything Daniel is powerless to control, including his deepest desires, worries, and concerns. To love her would be to acknowledge that the heart does not behave logically and that some things in life cannot be controlled neatly. In a way, Diane's news reflects this reality. It serves as a reminder that stability is a myth, life is erratic, and the only way to live fully is to accept the uncertainty. Daniel might at last be able to acknowledge his feelings for Tessa if he can acknowledge this. In the end, a moment of reckoning is created when Daniel's genuine love for Tessa and Diane's disturbing revelation collide. It is a test of his moral fiber, bravery, and readiness to put happiness ahead of security. His future and the destinies of others around him will be determined by the course he chooses. Will he escape and seize the love that has always been his, or will he stay imprisoned in the well-known boundaries of duty and denial? Daniel had been telling himself for weeks that his growing fascination with Tessa was nothing more than admiration for her resilience, her artistry, and the way she managed to light up a room even when life seemed determined to dim her shine. However, lately, that explanation had stopped holding water, and every time he caught himself watching her with that distant, almost guilty look in his eyes, he knew deep down he was lying to himself more than to anyone else. The answer lies in the depth of his feelings for Tessa, and whether he is finally ready to call them that. His own life was already a convoluted muddle of unresolved issues with Heather, silent regrets over the time he'd wasted with Lucy, and the burden of attempting to restore his place in Genoa City, so he hadn't meant for this to happen, and most definitely not at this time. However, Tessa had a way of intruding themselves into his thoughts. Her laugh would reverberate in his head for hours after a conversation ended, her small eccentricities would play back to him like fragments of a song he couldn't stop listening to, and her voice, God, her voice, would linger like the warm afterglow of a dream he didn't want to wake up from. He felt more conflicted because he didn't want to betray that trust for anything, but it didn't help that Mariah, in her fierce and loyal way, seemed to trust him implicitly with Tessa, as if she couldn't imagine a world where he'd cross a line. Every time he and Tessa shared one of those subtle, almost imperceptible moments, a smile that meant more than either of them would admit, a glance held just a beat too long, it became more difficult to ignore the fact that he was developing feelings far deeper than he should. He had always been adept at compartmentalizing and pushing uncomfortable feelings into a locked box in his head, but now he felt as though the box was beginning to crumble, and he wasn't sure whether he had the desire or even the strength to mend it. For her part, Tessa never made any indications of anything other than friendship, but there were moments when Daniel wondered if perhaps she felt the same way, even though neither of them would dare express it verbally. This happened late at night in the studio while they were working on a track together, their shoulders inadvertently brushing against each other, the air between them charged in a way that made it difficult to breathe. Desire was not always rational, and the more he tried to repress it, the more forceful it grew. He reminded himself that she was happily married and that Mariah had experienced too much heartache to merit even the slightest suggestion of treachery. Diane's disturbing news hit him like a thunderclap on a clear day, upending any equilibrium he had managed to preserve just when he believed he had it under control and could keep these emotions hidden. Daniel felt his gut clench before she even opened her words since she had pulled him aside at society with that half-smiling smile, but her eyes conveyed a whole different message. Diane didn't waste words, especially when it came to things she thought were important, and it was obvious from the way she leaned in and spoke in a low, purposeful tone that she thought what she was going to say could make all the difference. She started by saying, "Daniel, there's something you need to know about Tessa." His mind immediately raced through a dozen horrible scenarios, a disease, a choice that would end his career, the reemergence of some long-buried secret from her past, but the reality she presented was more nuanced, messy, and in some ways even more dangerous. Diane said that late one evening in the park, she heard Tessa talking to an enigmatic man, not totally by chance. Even though she didn't hear everything, she was positive she heard Tessa say something about not being able to keep up the charade much longer and Daniel deserves to know. The words struck him hard, and he tried to hide his reaction, but his heart raced and his mind went through all the possible outcomes, from not dangerous to disastrous. I don't know what it's about, but I thought you'd want to hear it from me before someone else spun it another way, Diane said, allowing the silence to linger long enough for him to begin questioning his own intuition. Daniel wanted to think this was just Diane stirring the pot, because heaven knows she's done that before, but there was a seriousness in her tone that convinced him she wasn't exaggerating. He couldn't approach Tessa without disclosing that Diane had been listening in, which would only make the situation worse. However, it felt impossible to do nothing. The thought of Tessa meeting an unidentified man in the park and discussing him as though they shared a secret tore at him like an uncontrollable itch. Suspicion, jealousy, and an intense need for the truth abruptly entangled all the emotions he had worked so hard to suppress. He began to examine every exchange he had with her over the last several weeks, reliving exchanges to uncover hidden meanings and challenging instances he had previously dismissed as the result of artistic stress or her typical private demeanor. Was she slipping away from him in little, barely noticeable ways? Or did he simply start seeing things that weren't there because he was so absorbed in his own emotions? His heart was already invested, whether he wanted to acknowledge it or not, and the more he considered it, the more he recognized how frustrating the ambiguity was. With his thumb hovering over Tessa's name and his contacts, Daniel poured himself a glass of scotch and sat in the dark light of his apartment that night. He could give her a call and ask directly, but what would he say? That would be nicely received. "Hey, Diane told me she overheard you plotting something in the park." The idea of losing that, even just the relationship, was intolerable to him, and he knew that if he faced her in the wrong way, it could ruin whatever trust and connection they had. Diane's remarks, however, would not leave him alone, and as the hours went by, his imagination filled in the blanks with more complex and sinister ideas. Perhaps it was nothing, perhaps it was something innocuous, but perhaps, just possibly, it was something that would permanently alter his perception of Tessa. If so, he wasn't sure which frightened him more, learning that she was keeping something from him or realizing that his feelings for her were much stronger than he was prepared to acknowledge, powerful enough to cause him to see her in a way he couldn't turn off. A seed of doubt had been sown by Diane's disturbing revelation, and Daniel was aware that once doubt entered the picture, it had a way of spreading until it smothered everything else, even devotion and love. He was aware of the irony. He had been taking such care to keep himself safe, only to discover that the act of caring for someone as deeply as he did for Tessa had left him more exposed than he had been in years. The damage was done, regardless of whether Diane's narrative was accurate, overblown, or misinterpreted entirely. Even though Tessa wasn't aware of it yet, something had changed between them, and Daniel wasn't sure how to reverse it.